Man, it's so good to be here. Welcome. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Troy. I get to be the next gen pastor here. And on behalf of our entire team and church family, just want to welcome you, say thank you for choosing to spend your Sunday morning with us. If you're tuning in online, let us know where you're watching from. We want to give you a shout out if you're in the grind, right here in the building, if you're in the family room, wherever you are, wherever you're watching, whenever you're watching, we want to welcome you and say thank you for choosing to spend just some time with us to lean in. And if you haven't noticed, if you look over here, just to my right, your left, you'll notice that Pastor Jack and Linda, you might have picked up that Micah, Mercedes, and Zion are not here today. They're not ditching church. All right. Pastor Jack actually had the wonderful opportunity to preach at his father's final service at San Diego New Life Church. And so I just want to show some love, man, and what a wonderful thing it is. His father, the Bishop Jack Anthony Sheets Sr., as I like to call him, Jack to the future, right? He is celebrating over 30 years in ministry, and he's retiring today. It's his last service, man, which is such a legacy and an honor to be able to have the entire family go there and be a part of that. And Pastor Jack gets to preach in the church he grew up in, where everybody knows he used to cut up a little bit, he used to, but that's our pastor, that's the family. We love them. We hope that everything is going well down there. He reached out just to express his love and gratitude, both him and Linda, for everything that's happening here. And so we want to say, man, best of luck. Good, man. We're excited to see you all next week. But as we continue to lean in, we're leaning into this series called Life Without Lack. Right, Life Without Lack, where we're taking an exploration of the 23rd Psalm, because the entirety of the Psalms, right, the book of Psalms, the Psalms are incredible. They're phenomenal. We had the opportunity with City Line Youth to walk through them just a few months back. But the book of Psalms, if you don't know this, is a collection of 150 ancient Hebrew poems, songs, and prayers, right, that come from different eras in Israel's history. And what's unique about the Psalms is it served as the prayer book for God's people. Right, Jesus would have been very familiar with these Psalms. The entire work, it has a unique design and message that continues to invite us, not just Israel in that time, but us as well, to worship with joy, with a little bit of pain, acknowledging that reality, with some anticipation of the future hope that God has. The Psalms are a masterclass, right, at entering into God's presence and devoting our whole life into following God, right? And no Psalm, none of them, are more quoted than the 23rd Psalm, right? We all know the 23rd Psalm. You hear it in movies. You hear it in raps. You see it printed on clothes, tattoos, art, paintings, all throughout history. Most of us, if not every single one of us, are familiar with it to at least some degree. Right? Sure, we may, when it's come time to recite it, we may stutter a little bit and stumble over some of the words. We may not, we may have different translations and things like that as we get into it. But, when it gets to the parts that we know, and when we say it, we get a little loud and proud, right? We do this whole like, the Lord is my shepherd. And, some like, want. Yea, though, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? I will fear, some in the presence of my enemies. Something like that, right? That's how we kind of roll through it. It was like, yeah, it's familiar, but if we're honest, maybe not as familiar as it should be to us. See, because it's that familiarity, that exposure that works against us actually sitting in it and understanding what this particular chapter is inviting us to, right? What this particular song is inviting us to consider as we look at life, which is why we said, hey, we're going to spend a couple of weeks just sitting in Psalm 23, right? We had two incredible messages, one on Psalm 23:1, and then the last one was verses 2 and part of verse 3. And it's been rich, it's been incredible to kind of lean into that. And we have a few more today and tomorrow. And so if you have your Bibles with you, right, if you brought them to church with you, let's turn then to Psalm 23. You can follow along in the Word, you can follow along on the screen, but we're going to read it together. Right? And so you don't stumble, the words are here for you. The Lord is my shepherd. We're going to read it together. Okay, let me start over. I'll count. 1, 2, 3. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. 6 verses. Extremely profound. Very simple. And if we're not careful, easy to miss the significance of. And for our purposes today, just in our time together, we're going to pick up on the second half of verse 3 and then sit in verse 4. See, because after talking about his soul being refreshed, this is David understanding that, yeah, man, my soul has been refreshed by God, and he makes me lie down in these green pastures. He cares for me, and he provides for me, and he does good things for me. He continues with a simple phrase that has huge implications. See, David, he continues and he says, he guides me along the right paths. He guides me along the right paths. See, the Judean countryside was not a pleasant place. It wasn't like the rolling hills that we see here. You know, we look at the pictures and we see just green grass as far as the eye can see. It wasn't like that at all. It was harsh. The weather was harsh. The terrain was rocky and difficult to navigate. The green pastures and still waters were not particularly abundant, but they were there. A shepherd would have to find them and then lead his sheep to them, which means that the quality of a sheep's life was entirely dependent on the quality of the shepherd that was shepherding them. Or whoever was leading them determined how good the life of the sheep was. See, unlike other livestock, unlike other creatures, we see cows grazing in the fields. We see groups of horses. We see, certain animals, and they can kind of be left to themselves, right? It is not so with sheep. Sheep can't be left to their own devices. When they are, it looks a little something like this.
С этой стороны, против солнца.
And that's live footage of me in my 20s. It was bad. Sheep can't be left to their own devices. In fact, author and shepherd Philip Keller, in his book, A Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm, he makes this observation from his time and his life shepherding. Sheep are notorious creatures of habit. If left to themselves, they will follow the same trails until they become ruts, graze the same hills until they turn to desert wastes, pollute their own ground until it's corrupt with disease and parasites. Sheep cannot be left to their own devices. And if we're honest, sounds a lot like us. Right? That sounds a lot like the way that we lived. In fact, and I say this with as much grace and love as I can, but we all, and I do mean all, we all suffer from varying degrees of sheepidity. Sheepidity is a term that Pastor Jack and I coined this week in conversation in the office. But here's what it means. Sheepidity, the human tendency to wander, repeat bad behaviors, and live with unhealthy habits. If you suffer from sheepidity, just show of hands real quick. Just a little bit. Not I'm saying a lot, but sheepidity, right? We have this tendency to veer off course. We have a tendency to circle the same things, to get involved in unhealthy rhythms and habits, right? And we can't seem to get out of our own way. It's like we get into trouble. God, would you please help me? God helps us. He pulls us out of the ditch. And what do? We're right back into the same mess and nonsense. And we do it over and over and over again. And here's the thing. While we're doing it, we think we're going the right way. Right, while we're making these choices, we think we're on the right path. We convince ourselves. We even go as far as to try to convince others around us who know better, right, that we are doing the right thing and going the right way. This is why in Proverbs, Solomon, who's known as the wisest man of all time, who's given a gift of profound wisdom, as he observes humanity, he makes this observation in Proverbs 14:12. It says, there is a way that seems right to a man or woman, which is not a sexist thing, just saying. Right, there's a way that seems right to a human, right? But its end is the way to death. It seems right. It seems good. It seems like we're on the right path. It seems like we're making good choices. It seems like we're going in the right direction. But in the end, it leads to destruction. In the end, it leads to harm. In the end, it leads to hurt and all sorts of chaos in our life. See, the reality about us is we tend to not find the right paths on our own. And if we do, because a broken clock is right twice a day, if we do stumble across them, we don't stay on them for very long. Right? We don't stay on that, as some people call it, the straight and narrow, right? We don't stay on the right path very long. We are more prone to wander aimlessly through life for weeks, months, years, decades, if we're not careful. We're prone to repeat unhealthy habits and behaviors and justify them and ignore them or say, hey, I just don't know any other way. We're prone to find ourselves stuck in destructive tendencies and habits, to keep going back to relationships and people that aren't life-giving or God-honoring, to pollute environments and relationships that would have been good otherwise because of our own unresolved issues, shame, insecurity, complaints, right? Again, like he says, we follow the same trails until they become ruts. We graze in the same hills until they turn into desert wastes. We pollute our own ground until it's corrupt with disease and parasites. And it doesn't just affect us, it affects others around us as well. And so the question we have to wrestle with, and I think what David is pointing us to in Psalm 23 is the answer to the question, how do we stay on the right path? How do we make sure we're staying on the right path? See, staying on the right path is essential, right? Staying on the right path, it necessitates trust in God. See, David was all too familiar with how his choices and his brokenness and his unresolved issues and his pride and his desire to do for himself and to go his own way, he was all too familiar with how that would lead to sickness and brokenness and death and destruction, not just in his life, but in those around him and in the kingdom he was given to steward. He was also, though, familiar with the grace and the goodness of God. And he understood what it looks like when life is then fully submitted to God's wisdom and direction. And being a shepherd himself, he was all too familiar with the difference between good shepherds and bad shepherds, right? See, in order to stay on the right path, it's imperative that we stay with the right shepherd. In order to stay on the right path, you have to stay with the right shepherd. Jesus, he puts it this way in John 10 and talking about good shepherds and bad shepherds and himself as being the good shepherd. He says, the thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He goes, but I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. See, Jesus understands this dynamic, and he points us to this reality that in this life, there is no shortage of options. There is no shortage of things that is trying to lead your life. We talked about that in week 1. There's no shortage of things competing to lead your life, whether that be family of origin, whether that be culture, whether that be our own desire, whether that be what we assume as our identity. There's no shortage of things or people attempting to lead our life. But Jesus wants us to understand that there is 2 choices really at the end of the day. There's bad shepherds and the good shepherd, right? We understand that dynamic. We know that, right? Students, we know there's good teachers and there's bad teachers, right? We understand that. We know that there's good doctors and there's bad doctors. We know there's good students and there's bad students, right? We know there's good people and there's people who we would rather keep away from. We understand that this dynamic is true. But the way Jesus sees it, see, these bad shepherds, they aren't really shepherds at all. Right? These bad shepherds aren't shepherds at all because they're in it for themselves. He calls them hired hands who are only in it for the paycheck, who are only in it for how it benefits them with no consideration for the welfare of the sheep. Because they're more than just bad shepherds. Jesus says they're thieves. They've come to steal, kill, and destroy. They've come to rob you of everything good that I've given you. They've come to rob you of my provision. They've come to rob you of my protection. They've come to rob you of the peace that comes when you follow me. Jesus is trying to help us understand that anything or anyone that is leading your life in a different direction than Jesus will ultimately lead to lack and loss. Like your life will ultimately end up defined by lack and loss, but Jesus is the good shepherd that will lead us along the right paths. Right? He says, I am the good shepherd, and I have come that you might have life and have it to the full, have it abundant, have it overflowing with goodness and overflowing with provision and overflowing with joy. See, I'm going to lead you on the paths that lead to health and wholeness instead of addiction, brokenness, and self-destructive habits. I'm going to lead you on the path that leads us away from the baggage that we inherit from our family of origin, that leads us away from generational trauma and generational curses, that leads us towards healing, healthy habits, healthy expectations, healthy relational dynamics, the wisdom that allows us to live rightly related to ourselves, to God, and to others. That's where Jesus wants to lead us. He goes along the right paths. The paths that lead to health and wholeness, the paths that don't lead you stuck in a ditch, the paths that don't lead you wandering and circling the same thing, the paths that don't turn into desert wastelands, the paths that aren't polluted with disease and sickness, paths that lead you to the life that's abundant, a life marked in the ways that Jesus desires you to live. And the question is then why? Why does he do it? Why does he do it? Why does a shepherd lead a sheep on right paths? And it says here, it's for his name's sake. He leads us for his name's sake. And no, God is not a narcissist, right? He's not trying to build his brand. He's not trying to build a platform. He's not self-obsessed or self-absorbed. God's not a narcissist. He is the creator, the originator, the sustainer of all creation. And here's the thing, life with him is second to none. He knows that the best thing for you is him. And so he invites us into a relationship with him. Everything that he does, everything that he says, everything that he invites us to is rooted in love. And it guides humanity and all of creation towards an eternal and abundant existence that is flourishing. Because I want good for you. And so would you follow me? And I do this for my name's sake. He leads each and every one of us using a way that also invites more people to have an opportunity to discover and follow him. And see, so if we're going to stay on the right path, we also have to realize that, and here's the thing, God is willing to put his name on your life. God is willing to put his name on your life. And I don't know about you, but there's things that I've been a part of that I would rather not put my name on. Right? We've all been there. There's, acting jobs and opportunities that I've done. I'm like, hey, let's delete that from online, please. Let's not let anybody be able to find that with a quick Google search, right? There's things that I don't want my name attached to. We understand that, right? We understand that. That's why some of us delete our search history. That's why some of us want to sneak out. That's why some of us go far away to indulge in certain things, because we don't want people to know that that's what we're involved in. We don't want to attach our name to our own habits and our own life. But God is willing to attach his name to our lives. Even more than that, we all know that there's people that we would rather not have our name attached to. Hey, when you come to my church, don't tell nobody you know me. You know what I'm saying? Like, we act like we don't know him. Like, hey, don't. We're not going to be friends on Facebook, because then people will know that we're somehow connected, right? There's family members. I'm like, look, yeah, we related, but, I ain't seen them in like 20 years. So, we'd rather not attach our name to certain people, but God is willing to put his name on your life. See, a shepherd's reputation was linked to the health of the flock and the health of the environments that they spend time in. Right, a shepherd's reputation was linked to the health of every single sheep in his care and the land, right? And the areas that they would graze and the places he would lead them. If he left that area and it was destroyed, then his reputation is sullied, right? If all of his sheep are sick or getting, devoured by wolves, then his reputation is tarnished. See, if a shepherd's flock was sickly, underfed, always injured, in danger, in the places that they would graze were left worse off than they were found them, it reflected poorly on the shepherd. And the same is true of us as Christ followers. See, if there's no evidence of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in our life, what does that say about Jesus? Right? If we want to put Jesus on, say, hey, I'm a Christ follower, I'm a Christian, we want to identify as people who follow Jesus, but then we look nothing like him. Then we act nothing like him. Then our love is nothing like his. Well, people are looking at us and they're saying, well, what does that say about Jesus? What does the way you talk to people say about Jesus? What does the way you engage in your relationship say about Jesus? What does your approach to life say about the God you claim to serve? See, if our relationships are always chaotic and in disarray, what does that say about the way that we're going? If our homes, workplaces, classrooms, friend circles, teams, etc., aren't better off because we're there, what does that say about the Christ we claim to follow? Right? He's willing to put his name on our life. And see, because we all know this, once you make it known that you follow Jesus, people notice. Once you make it known that, no, Jesus, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christ follower, Jesus is leading my life, they pay attention to the way you react and respond to things, right? The way you show up at work, you show up on time, do you show up ready to work? Do you honor your bosses? Do you get along with your coworkers? Like, how do you show up in that space? Are you always complaining? Are you always frustrated? Are you always depleted? Is everything around you always going in disarray? They pay attention to the things you post, the things you like, the things you share on social media. Whatever it is, and in this season, even more so than usual, right? Because once you make it known that Jesus is leading your life, people are paying attention, and they're paying attention. And here's the thing, his reputation is on the line. His reputation is on the line. We sing songs like holy is your name, but do we live as if his name is holy? Right, worthy is your name, but do we live as if his name is worthy enough for us to submit our ways, our actions, our behaviors? Or do we just want to sing a song in a moment acknowledging the goodness of God, but do we live according to that goodness, that wisdom, in that direction? Right? See, if you're willing to live under his leadership and in close companion with Jesus, he'll stake his reputation on your life. See, your maturity, your integrity, your attitudes and behavior, it's a priority for Jesus. Right? It's a priority. He will do it. He will work it out if you would just trust him when it comes to your life. His reputation as the good shepherd is on the line. And here's the good news about Jesus. He can't be anything other than who he is. He can't be anything other than present. He can't be anything other than gracious. He can't be anything other than generous, compassionate, loving, and kind. That is who he is. And his name is on the line, so trust and believe that he will show up in your life exactly as he has always shown up since the beginning of time. He will show up with grace and truth. He will show up with love. He will show up with wisdom. He will show up with direction. He will show up with compassion and with forgiveness. That's who he is. The same idea is carried over as Jesus prays this Lord's Prayer, as he gives us this framework when he says, Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, or Father in heaven, may your name be recognized as holy. May people see you for who you really are through my life. May people come to understand and recognize the goodness of God by the way that I live. Right? May the areas and environments that I leave, may the mark of Jesus be placed upon them. When I show up, let people see Jesus and not the brokenness of Troy. I give in the way that I talk, in the way that I live, in my relationships, in my compassion, in my character, let Jesus be made known. He says, if I be lifted up, if I be elevated above your issue, if I be elevated above your culture, if I be elevated above your family of origin, if I be elevated above your idea of who I am, if you take me for who I really am and you lift me up, guess what he'll do? He will draw all people to himself, and he is the best thing for them. That is who Jesus is. Oftentimes, though we know that our character is most scrutinized, right, during challenging and uncomfortable times. But here's the thing, his character is most on display in the challenging and uncomfortable times. Right? We understand if his name is to be recognized as holy, the only way to fully see him for who he really is, to fully understand who he really is we have to go through some challenging and uncomfortable times, which means we must be willing to walk through the darkest valleys. Right? We must be willing to walk through the darkest valleys. He continues, David, in verse 4, even though I walk through the darkest valleys, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. But here's what I know about us. We'd rather avoid the valley, right? We would rather avoid the dark valley. And we say, well, Jesus even prays a similar prayer to invite us to understand. He goes, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our bread for today and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And then he continues on. He goes, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. He goes, don't lead us through the testing if it's possible. Right? He prays it again in the garden. If it's possible, let this cup pass from me. But then he resolved that by saying what? Nevertheless, your will be done, not mine. God, I don't want to go through the dark valley. God, if we can avoid that darkness, if we can avoid that challenge, if we can avoid that struggle, let us just find another path. But sometimes the right path is through the darkest valley, right? But see, wouldn't it be better, okay, walk through the valley, right? Why walk? Wouldn't it be better to run? Or wouldn't it be ready to, let's get this over quick, right? Rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just kind of move through this challenge and let's move through it expeditiously. Let's kind of move quick through the valley. Or let's, you got ways, Jesus. Can we just find another path? Is there a detour that we can follow? It might take a little bit longer, God, but it's easier at the end of the day. We can avoid that whole darkness thing, right? It's like Mufasa told Simba, we must never go there, right? Let's just avoid that dark spot over there. Let's just try to move in a different way. But here's the thing. The right paths are seldom the safest. The right paths are seldom the safest. This profound truth about shepherding in the summer months good shepherds would take their flock on a journey, and they would take them on a journey to the high country, right? They would take them up to the mountains where green pastures and fresh waters were there. But the journey was not an easy journey. The journey was a challenging journey. It was one with a significant number of dangers, right? And there was no way for the sheep in that season to get the abundance of the high country without journeying through some valleys, right? There was no way to arrive at the high places, these mountaintop experiences, right? These places of abundance and flourishing and where there was no lack. There's no way to get there unless they journey through the valley. In the same way, life with Jesus, it necessitates traveling through the lows of life. It necessitates going through some hard things. It necessitates taking up our cross. It necessitates dying to ourselves. It necessitates embracing some struggle, some trouble, right? Because that's the only way to get to the high places. In fact, as Jesus is praying for his disciples, he has this discourse with them just before he's going to be crucified, as we're getting closer to the passion. And in John 16:33, to help them understand the reality of the valley they were about to go through, Jesus, he offers them some wisdom. After talking about the Holy Spirit and after talking about remaining in him and after kind of instructing them on how to engage in their relationship with one another and with God, he says this in John 16:33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. He says, in this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, he has overcome the world. You will have trouble. See, we often think that the valley of the shadow of death or this valley of darkness or the seasons in our life of grief and pain and loss and struggle and heartache, we often think or we often convince ourselves, and the enemy would love us to believe that those are the seasons and places and spaces that God is not. That God must be distant, that God must be absent, that God must not care, that he's disinterested or he's disconnected from what's going on, right? But the truth is quite the opposite. In fact, a good shepherd would have gone to familiarize himself with the treacherous terrain before ever leading the sheep through it. He would have gone before them and examined the area, surveyed, went on a reconnaissance mission to take inventory of everything that's there and became well acquainted with the hazards and the pitfalls and the dangers, the predators and the potential struggles that the sheep would have in that journey so he could map out the best possible path, the right path for them through that dark valley. Understanding that the only way to get to where you need to be is to go through this with me. That's the beauty of God. He goes before us. He prepares a way. He is never leading you where he has not been. Think about that. God is never leading you where he has not been. He's been in the darkest valley. He's been in the grief and the loss. He's been in the heartache. He's been in the struggle. He's been there with the tears. He is well acquainted with grief. He has been there. He has gone before you. And he has mapped out the best possible path so you can get to where he wants you to be. He is leading you through the darkest valley. We can take encouragement from the words Moses spoke to Joshua in Deuteronomy 31:8, right? As they're getting ready to go on the Canaanite conquest. And he says this, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. Notice how David says, I will fear no evil in this darkest valley because you are with me. He doesn't say I will fear no evil because I'm brave and I'm bold and I'm a man. No, he doesn't say I fear no evil because of the things that I've been through. He doesn't say I will fear no evil because I've already killed the lion and the bear. He doesn't say I'll fear no evil because I already faced Goliath. No. He says I will fear no evil because you are with me. This is the point in the psalm in which the language turns from talking about God to talking with God. Right? He goes, the Lord is my shepherd, but now he says, you are with me. You comfort me. You go before me. He goes, the Lord himself will go before you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. See, this helps us to understand that the way to journey through the valley is to do it with Jesus. The way to make it to the other side, the way to make it to the mountaintop, right? And every valley that you'll experience in between is to journey with Jesus. Because in this world, you will have trouble. With Jesus or without him. In this world, you will experience loss, no matter what. In this world, you will endure pain. In this world, you will have struggle. With Jesus or without. But without his leadership, we die in the valley. Without his leadership, we stay stuck. We never find the green pastures or still waters. Without his leadership, we never have the abundant life that he promises. Without his leadership, we live a life defined by lack and loss and struggle and pain. Without his leadership, we get devoured by the wolves that would seek to eat us in that valley. Without his leadership, our struggles consume us. Without his leadership, we never find the right way. We circle the wagon time after time after time until we get sick and we die. But with him, we have life and we have it to the full. But with him, we make it through the valley. See, the valley isn't the end of the journey. The valley isn't the place where we become overwhelmed by fear. The valley is the place where we get closer to the Father. The valley is the place where the good shepherd makes his presence known to us every step of the way. The valley is the place where we become more acquainted with him than we are with the valley itself. This is why men like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can stand confident before Nebuchadnezzar and say, our God is able to deliver us from the fire. But if he doesn't, we still will worship him. This is how Daniel can fall asleep in a lion's den. This is how Paul in the midnight hour can sing praises to God. Why? Because they were acquainted with struggle and they were acquainted with grief, but they were more acquainted with God. They were more acquainted with the good shepherd. They were closer to him. Their eyes were on him. It wasn't focused on the struggle. I don't know what valley you may find yourself in, but I do know this. God didn't bring you this far to bring you this far. God didn't bring you this far to bring you this far. He's not going to leave you or forsake you. He's not going to cut and run in the valley. He's not going to see a sheep or wolf and go, oh, my Lord, what do I need to do about this? And run and leave you. He's not going to throw you and say, oh, well, I have him and let me go and get myself to safety. That's not his attitude. He will go before you. He will defend you. He will protect you. He will guide you. He will comfort you. He will nurse you back to health, and he will carry you, if need be, on his shoulders through that valley. He didn't bring you this far to bring you this far. The journey is not over. You are simply traveling through the valley. You will make your way to the mountaintop if you continue to trust in him, to follow him. The valley isn't the end of it. But here's the thing, in order to make it to the mountaintop, in order to make it there, we have to submit to the direction and correction of the good shepherd. We have to submit. And that's the S word for many of us. Like submit, nah, I don't do that. I don't do that submitting thing, right? I'm not about that, right? But we have to submit to the direction and correction of the good shepherd. This is what David is expressing as he continues in verse 4 when he says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. He goes, I fear no evil as I walk through the valley. Why? Because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I know I can make it through. Why? Because your rod and your staff, they comfort me. See, here's the thing. We all ultimately, we want to go our own way. That's our desire. We want to chart our own path. We want to make our own legacy. We want to build a name for ourselves. We want to do what we want to do. Submission and obedience is where we tend to buck against the ways of Jesus. It's all good when it aligns with us. It's all good when it's something that we're comfortable with. It's all good, right? Submitting to Jesus is easy when he wants us to do something that benefits us. Submitting to Jesus is easy when the things he asks us for are easy to give up. I was going to give that up anyway. Man, that's nothing. Like that's all. I'm with you, Jesus. I got free time in my schedule anyway. I was going to do that already. It's easy. But then when he asks something of us, then it becomes hard. When he says, take up your cross, we're like, like it's heavy. It's uncomfortable. We ultimately buck against the ways of Jesus. But here's the thing. If the Lord is your shepherd, your life is one of submission. Right? We walk when he says walk. We rest when he says rest. We go where he tells us to go, and we don't go where he tells us not to go. We do what he tells us, when and how he tells us to do it. And it's in our best interests, not just to follow, not just to stay close to the shepherd, but to trust and obey the shepherd. Right? It's in our best interests to live a life of obedience, to understand the ways of Jesus, the things that he teaches, the things that he invites us to, and to say, God, I'm going to strive to understand what you're inviting me to and to live submitted, to trust you and to live a life of obedience. He goes, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. A shepherd's rod was a tool of protection for his sheep, to protect them from predators and themselves, right? It would protect the sheep from themselves and from predators. The shepherd would use the rod to passionately defend his flock or to lovingly correct them. It wasn't beating them or breaking their legs. It was just a quick tap on the head, say, hey, you're going the wrong way. Hey, you're gonna eat something that's bad for you. Hey, you're gonna engage in some poison. Hey, that's a wolf's den over there. Hey, like you need to bring it back in and trust me and follow me. Hey, you're venturing a little too far off course. And it will bring them back to the shepherd. See, if a shepherd saw a sheep was wandering towards danger, either to consume something poisonous or harmful, or to fall into a ditch or a pitfall, the rod was used to bring them back to the flock. So they're not isolated and alone, so they're not wandering towards danger. He would also use the rod to just comb over the sheep to see if there's any parasites or any injuries, any issues that are happening under the surface, right? Because their wool gets thick and it's big, and there's a lot of things that happen under the surface that you can't see that can lead to sickness and disease. And so the shepherd would take time to examine and use his rod to just comb over the sheep to make sure they were in good health. Every now and again, hey, we've been journeying for a long time. Let's sit down and check you out. The same thing that Jesus does for us. Hey, we've been walking this way for a long time. Let's sit down and just check you out. Here, sit in my lap real quick. Let me just comb over you. Let me make sure you're good. Let me make sure you're healthy. Hey, it looks like you need a little rest. Hey, looks like you need some water. Hey, looks like you need a little oil. Hey, it looks like you need something. Hey, would you come and sit in my lap so I can make sure you have what you need? So you can make sure you know you're loved. So you can make sure that it's not just about the journey, it's about who you're journeying with. That he cares for each and every one of us. He would examine it in the same way. The word of God, it guards our heart and our mind. It makes us aware of the dangers within us and the dangers around us and reminds us of the authority that Jesus has in our life. And we live with his authority. We understand that he is also the author and the finisher, that he brings our journey to completion, that he guides us in the right way, that he wants something good for us, that ultimately he has come that we might have life and life to the full. And so as he examines us, as he corrects us, we understand that that is the end goal, is this abundant life that he has promised. And so we journey with the shepherd and we accept the correction and protection of his rod. Because it's only in complete trust that we find ourselves completely protected. Partial trust leads to wandering. Partial trust leads to us questioning the leadership of the shepherd. Partial trust will ultimately lead us into a ditch or a ravine. Partial trust will ultimately lead us isolated from the flock. And see, while the rod is a symbol and tool of authority, the staff was one of care. It is used to guide the sheep, to bring them close. Has a little hook on it. You can just bring them right there, bring them right next to you. It was like an extension of the shepherd's hand. He would rest it on the sheep, and it's like they're holding hands as they journey. And can you imagine that picture? Jesus said, hey, I want to walk with you. Come journey with me. Follow me. We'll walk hand in hand through this. We'll walk hand in hand through the ups and downs of life. It's used to guide the sheep, bring them close, to offer them companionship as he gently places it on them while they journey. In the same way, Jesus says, hey, I'm going to leave you, but I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to give you my Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is going to be in you. I'm going to breathe on you so that my spirit is in you so that you know I am with you always, even when to the end of the age. So no matter when it is or where you're going or what's going on in life or how long you've been journeying, you can trust and know that God is with you, that his spirit is with you. It's to comfort us, to bring us to closeness with him so that we journey with the good shepherd every step of the way. But it's only in complete obedience that we find ourselves completely cared for, right? The sheep that would seek to remove himself from the shepherd's hand is now at the mercy of his own devices. But as we stay completely obedient to Jesus, we live in his care. In fact, Jesus, he makes an interesting observation. In Matthew 9:36, as Jesus becomes flesh and makes his dwelling among us, as the good shepherd comes down and he starts to walk with us and journey with us, he takes inventory of the flock. He sees the way people are living. He sees the way in which we're relating to each other. He sees the things that are happening, even amongst the religious leaders, and his heart is broken by what he sees. And in Matthew 9:36, he says this, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He looked out and he saw the condition of people's lives. He saw the way that they were engaged in relationship, the way that they would even be invited to follow him. And he's moved with compassion. It's like this idea that he was so disturbed in his gut, right? That's that word, that compassion is like he was so bothered to the core of who he is because he saw that they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. They had no rod and no staff to comfort them. They had no direction, no protection. They had no comfort. They had no care. They were harassed, right? To be harassed is to be overwhelmed by outside threats and predators. So everywhere you go, there's danger and you have no idea that it's even there or what to do about it. They're harassed. Every time you go out, there's something coming against you. Every time you try to speak up, there's something arguing with you. There's something that's opposed to you. You feel like I can never get ahead. I can never get a word in edgewise. My life is a consistent battle and struggle. And goes, that's not the life that I have for you. And helpless. Helpless. Anybody ever felt helpless before? It's the worst feeling. Because there's something that needs to be done, and there is nothing you can do about it. That's life without Jesus. Your healing needs to happen. Your wholeness needs to happen. Your marriage needs to be fixed. Your finances needs to be fixed. You need a job. You need a job. You need a means of providing. You need purpose. You need all of these things. You need some peace. You need some love. You need to be comforted. You see all these things. And here's the thing. There is nothing you can do about it. And there's nothing you have to do about it. But to be helpless is this understanding that you are at the mercy of everything that happens around you and your own self-destructive tendencies. And even the brokenness in you, you can't change and you can't fix. Even the things about you that you would like to be different, you can't change them. Only God can. Only God can. He goes, man, they're harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. The same doesn't have to be true of us. We don't have to go through life every single day harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd because we have the good shepherd, right? We don't have to be harassed and helpless. We don't have to be overwhelmed by everything that happens around us, everything we see on the news, as we scroll through our feed, as we hear things talked about, as we see what's happening in the world. We don't have to be overwhelmed by these outside threats and predators because we live in close proximity and in companionship with the good shepherd. And we don't have to live life helpless. We don't have to try to figure it out on our own, to white knuckle our way through our hurts, habits, and hangups, to figure out a healing and a solution on our own. No, he offers us healing and wholeness that is found in him. He invites us to come and sit with him. He invites us into relationship with him. He goes, I'll take care of your healing. I'll take care of your wholeness. I will care for you. I will walk with you through the valley, on the mountaintop, and everything in between. I am with you always. Even to the very end of the age. We don't have to be harassed and helpless because we're not sheep without a shepherd. And if you feel like that's your life, I would invite you to consider life with the good shepherd because it's a life without lack. It's a life that's not defined by struggle and hostility and chaos, but one of wholeness and peace and health. One that is indicative of the abundant life that Jesus promises. That's what he invites us to. But here's the thing we have to accept. If we have said yes to Jesus and we still feel harassed and helpless, the question we have to answer is, are we completely submitted to him? Are we following the right path? Are we staying with the right shepherd? Are we walking through the valley? Are we trying to shortcut the process? Are we trying to run and go our own way? Are we trusting in the good shepherd? Do we embrace his direction and correction? Because here's the thing, it's only in complete submission to Jesus that we find ourselves completely comforted. It's only in complete submission to Jesus that we find ourselves completely comforted. And hear me when I say this, partial submission is not submission at all. That's you still being the shepherd of your own life. Saying, I'll follow Jesus when it's comfortable. I'll follow Jesus when it's convenient. I'll follow Jesus when it lines up with what I want to do. No, Jesus is saying, would you take up your cross and follow me? Would you die to yourself? Would you trust me? Would you go the way that I invite you to go? It's only in complete submission to Jesus that we find ourselves completely comforted. So I'll end with reading Psalm 23. I want to invite you to simply close your eyes and envision as best you can what David is bringing to our heart and mind. Let the words speak to your heart and your soul. Even if you're familiar, approach it as best you can as if you're hearing it for the very first time. Let's pray. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.